and thinking how to explain this as an importance to you. If the self that appears when we're emotional, okay, so you have to go to an emotional time, a time when you were jealous, angry, hatred, one of these strong emotions. When that emotion appears, you have a strong appearance of a self. We can agree? Yeah? When your room is flooding, you think, my room, why me, right? Or the kids, or somebody nearly hits the car. One of these strong times, and very quickly, this I, self, appears, okay? So that's what we're talking about, is this appearance of a self. For some people, it's easier to look at inanimate objects and look at how does that exist. But I'm going to put that to one side and just talk about us, because this is important for us. We're sure, I think, all of us, we're sure that there is a self, because we're always talking about self. We're always talking about I. I'm sitting, I'm going, I'm walking, I'm eating, I'm all day. We're doing this range of activities in relation to I. So then Buddhism says, if this I is your boss, if this I is telling you what to do, and this I is saying, I'm angry, I'm jealous, I have hatred. So now it's promoting a negative action because of the delusion. If that I is promoting it, shouldn't you know where that I is and whether that I exists? Because it's the I that says, I want you to do something negative towards that enemy. I want you to cheat. I want you to steal. I want you to lie. I want you to be divisive. There's an I involved with all our negative actions. We're not thinking about the positive ones. We're only thinking about the negative because of the consequences. You understand? Because when we're talking about the negative, there are negative consequences for others and for oneself. For the positive actions, I have love and compassion. Where's the problem? Unless there's something sneaky going on underneath. But, let's take the positive and put it to one side. Let's talk about the negative. The appearance of the I saying, I'm jealous. So I want to do something towards whom I'm jealous. I want to do a negative action. And normally, jealousy or anger or hatred would appear, would arise, and we would just follow it. We would just do it. Or we'd have a struggle with it, and we might say, no, that's not a nice thing to do. And there's I saying, go on, do it. Just from beginningless time, you followed me, so now just do it. Now Buddhism says, what Buddha said is, where is that I? Does it exist? And if it does exist, where and how does it exist? So you have to do an analysis based on what you think exists. So you think it exists. You assent, you agree to its existence. But does it really exist? And that's when we start to look for it. So the time to look for it is when you're emotional, when the emotion is appearing. Because when that emotion is appearing is the time when you're prospectively, possibly, going to do something negative, something harmful. And what's the result? We've talked about the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering. What's about to come back to you is suffering. So why are you throwing these boomerangs? The I is saying, throw the boomerang. Right? Go for it. We've done it before, do it again. So you can just automatically throw the boomerang. And the boomerang comes back and hurts you and creates suffering for you. And you say, why me? It's not fair. So how do you change things? The very fundamental ignorance, opposite to wisdom, the fundamental ignorance is believing the self to exist. So we do believe the self exists, we do think it exists, and conventionally it exists as a label on the base. So you can say male, name, that exists, right? But does the label exist? Can you find the label? The label doesn't exist from its own side inherently, because if it did, the parents don't have to decide the name. When you come out, they'd say Catalina or Susanna or George, or, when the baby came out, if the label was mixed into the baby, then the label was inherently existent. There's no need for the parents to decide the label. Do you understand? So that's what we're looking for. Once we put the label and we use the label over and over, then the label appears to exist from its own side. Not from this side, but as if it's coming this way. So if I say Catalina, Eduardo, like that, you say, oh yes, I know who that is. You have a picture in your mind. You know that person, who they are and what they are. So conventionally, there's just simple actions like I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm sitting. These are not problematic. They don't create negative actions, negative karma. But then the ultimate truth, the ultimate wisdom is, do you really exist? So conventionally, we've agreed we exist. I'm sitting, I'm listening. That's okay. But now you analyze the same person, the same self. Do you really exist the way you think? And then it would be an inherently existent self. A self that exists without causes and conditions. That's what we're looking for. So something separate from the body-mind. We can agree there is a body, there is a mind, a thinker, but something separate from that. So the example I like to give, which I think makes it a little bit clearer, is when the rainbow appears in the sky, and I think I heard thunder, right? So there's always a possibility. When there's thunder and then rain, there's always that possibility of the rainbow. Because causes and conditions have come together that give an appearance. So the important word is appearance, right? An appearance of a rainbow. So when the rainbow appears, then we think there is a rainbow and we believe it to exist. In the same way, because of causes and conditions, I got angry or I got upset or I have jealousy, there's an appearance of an I, but it's only because of causes and conditions there's an appearance. It doesn't exist from its own side. There isn't a separate entity, a separate blob of I, which if we do a post-mortem, if we cut open the body, and we look for I, we're sure I exists. But when we look in the body for I, we can't find the I. When we look in the mind for a piece of I, it doesn't exist. And yet there is an appearance of I. So the appearance is accepted on the conventional level, on the ordinary level, the functional level. And that means we can say room, air conditioner, floor, shoes. We can say these labels and we know what they mean. They function as a convention. But when we're looking at the ultimate truth, we say, okay, you say shoes exist, but where are the shoes? As if shoes exist from their own side, separate from shoes, or shirt, or wall, or anything. When we keep using the label, then eventually it seems to exist from its own side, as if it's coming this way, but we forget it's a label that we put on the base, and then we believe it to exist. So why is this important? I'm angry. I have hatred. I'm jealous. These negatives, when we have them, we very strongly feel them, and we feel the I is mixed with the emotion. And then, because it's an accumulation of ignorance, believing the I to exist, then we believe the other to exist. Because if I exist, you must exist. Really exist. Inherently exist as the enemy. Right? So if I'm angry, you become the enemy, and then I project my negativity onto you as the enemy, thinking you exist, and then I have to respond. I have to do something about it because you're the enemy, and the enemy is inherently existent. Just like I'm inherently angry. So, where it makes a difference is if we cease to believe so strongly in the I, the self, we still function, but we don't so strongly believe in the emotions that are coming from the I. We don't so strongly believe in the enemy, in the attached object, in the objects as they appear outside. We don't so strongly believe in those. And so gradually we erode the value of what we're attached to, what we grasp onto, what we hate. Because inside there's an appearance of an I, and then we grasp onto it. Mentally, we grasp. Right? And we say, mine, I, mine. Me, self, whatever. So we grasp onto that appearance of self, and then we cherish it. We're selfish about it. I want to make myself happy and to avoid suffering. So all this comes from the very root ignorance. What we call root ignorance is believing the self to exist when it's only an appearance. Because of causes and conditions, it appears like the rainbow. But try grasping onto a rainbow. Try holding onto it. You can't. Right? So then we know what the situation with the rainbow is. We know we can't go out and get hold of it. My mother used to say, there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Go and find it. I used to spend the whole day walking, looking for the rainbow. So I know there's no rainbow that you can grasp onto. In the same way, when the self appears, if you believe in it, then you assent to the ignorance that you've always been assenting to. You've always agreed to it. So then I exist, you exist, there's a dualism, a separation between us, and then a fight can exist, an enemy can exist, an attached object can exist, because I exist and you exist. So as soon as we start thinking, do I really exist the way I think? We're not saying doesn't exist at all. That would be a fault. If you say doesn't exist at all, you go to nihilism. Nothing exists. The other way, everything exists, is eternalism. Everything exists the way we think, unchangingly. It's also a fault. So the middle way is, yes, things exist, but not the way we think. And so then we start looking for the inherently existent angry self, the inherently existent boss who's angry, the inherently existent attachment object. Whatever it is, whenever there's a negative that we're about to promote, we're looking for, so where's the self that says we should be negative? Where's the self that says we should be angry or have jealousy? Does it really exist? And just that stops you, because you go back to, so isn't it just an appearance of a self because of causes and conditions? And if it's just an appearance, then what I'm following is the habit of what I've always done. The appearance comes about because previous habit. The self appears, and then I grasp onto it, and then I take care of it, and then I do a negative action, and then the self disappears. And then another situation, the self appears, I grasp onto it, I look after it, and then the self disappears. And I've been doing that for a long, long time. And it hasn't worked for me. Why not? Because I'm not totally happy. And because I have suffering. So that shows you it hasn't really worked. What we've been doing isn't fully operational, isn't fully what we should be doing. We're faulty somewhere. And Buddhism says this is where we're faulty. With the wisdom ignorance, we're not seeing things as they are. We're seeing them as they're not. And that's what keeps this suffering going. That's how you don't see the exit. Because to see the exit, you need to see that I'm manufacturing my suffering world. I'm producing it in my mind and then projecting it out onto the world. So now you're sorry you asked?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Yes.
So,
You may ask.
Um,
Even though you're not a boy.
Sorry?
Even though you're not a boy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. The inherent true self or true whatever should be a perfect one.
Inherent means non-changing, to never change. So it would have to be findable, and it would have to be unchanging, and it would have to be something. It doesn't mean actually perfect, it could be inherently really bad. Right? It doesn't mean inherently really good. Inherent just means something that exists without causes and conditions. So it could be inherently really bad.
So there are selves.
There are?
Some people are inherently good and some bad.
No, Buddhism is not positing inherence, it's positing non-inherence. Buddhism says you think it's inherent, but it's not. What Buddhism says is nothing is inherently existent. Everything exists because of causes and conditions.